I'm not at a Grand Prix, I like to watch the race on my nice big screen at home with a laptop there with all the data as well, so I've got as much information as possible. Today though, this is how I'm doing it. I'm on my way to the airport heading to Munich for a job with BMW, so this is all I've got. What an amazing win for Charles Leclerc. What a win. What a brilliant drive under immense pressure. Some controversial moments in there, but some brilliant driving. I think it was a thoroughly deserved victory in front of an incredible crowd. I mean, what a great race as well. It wasn't the way I wanted to watch it, and I certainly missed bits of it as the thing was buffering like mad. It was so frustrating when that little circle of death on your phone starts buffering away in the middle of a Grand Prix, but I'm pleased I got to see it. I thought I was going to miss a lot of it today, so pleased I got to see some of that. I'm now on my way out of here, on to Munich to do some filming for BMW, as I said, but on the way, and when I get there, I'm going to try and take some of your questions for this week's Ask Elvis. Do you know what? I thought it was a really good race, and do you know what I really liked about it? And this is probably, I'm sure, I'm sitting here waiting for questions to come in for Ask Elvis because the race is, of course, just finished. But I'm sure some of the questions are going to be about the stewarding decisions. There were a couple of controversial moments, weren't there? But you know what? I thought they got it right. And I know that lots of you will be shouting, well, there were precedents set that were different, that were dealt with differently. I know all of that. But there's definitely been a shift in the stewarding process and in the thinking behind the stewarding process. It's actually been driven by the teams and the drivers, and the FIA and F1 have all got together and decided they want to have this let them race philosophy. Michael Massey confirmed it today in Sky's post-race show that I saw a little bit of, and I agree with that. Let's let them race. The one thing that I disagreed, or not even disagreed, but took issue with, is the fact that he explained that there was no penalty given to Charles for the incident with him and Lewis, where he sort of squeezed Lewis and Lewis had to run off the track. There was no penalty given in that incident because there was no contact between the two drivers. For me, that's not a good enough argument. The offence is what the offending or the defending driver does. That's the offence. The consequence, well, that can be down to a number of factors. That's, in that particular instance, is down to the actions of Lewis Hamilton. It's down to the actions of the person on the end of the offending driving standards, if you want to call it that. And surely you can't have a penalty dependent on what the person on the receiving end of that poor driving standards does to act around that. So the idea that there's no contact, meaning there should be no penalty, for me is not a great argument and perhaps needs more discussion. But in general, I really like the idea of this let them race attitude. Let's get on with it. It was on the verge of dangerous, but it didn't cause a dangerous incident, and a large part of that goes down to the fact that Lewis managed to avoid it, so I take that. But I'm really pleased that the stewards let these things play out. I don't believe it was simply because we're in Monza and there's a huge Ferrari crowd. I think if we ever get to the point where we let that affect our stewarding decisions, we're in a really bad place at the pinnacle of motorsport. So I was pleased with the way things panned out today. I sort of agreed as well with the idea behind the Seb incident and the penalty received, and for Lance Stroll as well. I thought overall they got it about right. Of course, as ever, I'd love to know what you think. Right, what's up folks? I'm here in Munich, in my hotel room. So let's get through a couple of questions. And there are a few questions that are already on the subject that I talked about back in the airport at Heathrow, but I want to pick up on some of those, a couple of those quickly. Right, like this one from Andrew, who says, sorry, this is probably really echoey, isn't it? Let's bring this camera down here. Let's try and improve the sound quality of this video a little bit. Right, Andrew says, love today's race, and I'd like to hear your opinion on the team's driver's request to race director Michael Massey in bringing back the black and white flag. I think it's brilliant, keeps racing hard and fast, but fair. Well, Andrew, I totally agree with you. I think it's a really sensible decision. I'm pleased that it also was driven by the teams and the drivers, because that also shows that they have this desire to keep racing as well, even though we hear them on the radio moaning all the time, trying to get penalties handed out to other drivers. Really, at the heart of it, they know that one day it could be them and they want to keep racing. So yeah, for me, great idea. I love it. What else have we got? Oliver Archer says, Massey has said, that's Massey as in race director Michael Massey, said that Leclerc would have been penalised if there'd been contact. Is that the right message to be sending out given recent events, that you can push someone off the track as long as they back out and you'll get away with it? Well, Oliver, I touched on it earlier and I totally agree with you, mate. I think that's the wrong way to look at it, and I totally understand where they have to somewhere draw a line between giving out penalties and allowing a sort of black flag or a warning type situation. But I don't think it's right that it's all down to how the recipient of the bad driving deals with the bad driving. That's wrong, in my opinion. So I'm not sure the right solution, but that's one for the stewards to work out. But yeah, I totally agree with you, Oliver. I think that's not the right way to look at it. Right, now let's move on to a couple of others. Oh no, let's pick up this one quickly. Brandon Dorr says, do you think this race was sort of a changing of the guard at Ferrari? Leclerc seems to be getting more and more comfortable as Vettel once again loses it. I mean, yes, 100%. Not just today, but I think it's been coming, hasn't it, over this season. Leclerc has settled in very quickly and very nicely into Ferrari. Yeah, he's made some mistakes early on. He even made mistakes in today's race, didn't he? But he's quick. He seems generally calm, very mature for a guy of his age. And ultimately, and this is the thing that really matters when it comes to motor racing, lots of the time he's quicker than Seb. And that is what it will all come down to. That's what he will be judged on, not just in qualifying, but when it comes to the race. You know, Seb was quick in qualifying, let's make no mistake. Seb didn't get the toe. And actually, he lost so much time through not having a toe that his actual lap time without the toe probably would have put him on pole. And maybe wouldn't have been talking about such a domination from Leclerc. But either way, it wasn't about this weekend. It's been coming for some time. And today, having done it in front of the Italian fans, will have just rammed home the growing stature of Charles Leclerc. So, yeah, changing of the guard is probably... I know it's an overused term, but I think it's the right term for this particular situation. Got to put the camera down, it's heavy. Right, room service ordered, pizza and beer. Classic. Let's crack on. Tom Tanguay? Tom Tang. Let's call you Tom. Old Fernando Alonso is back in the paddock this weekend. Is there the slightest of chances he'd replace Vettel next year with Ferrari? I really can't see it. He's not, I mean, with the greatest respect to Fernando, I've talked about this many times, and I'm talking about Fernando with experience of having worked with him. He's not what Ferrari need right now. The Ferrari's future lies in the hands of Charles Leclerc. And yes, he's the young gun at the moment alongside Sebastian, but they've got two very good drivers in those two guys. And they're two drivers that are not really going to upset the apple cart too much. Fernando Alonso has the potential to do that. He did it last time. He fell out with a lot of people at Ferrari. They haven't forgotten that, and I don't think they'll have him back. I mean, I could be proved wrong, but I don't think they'll have him back. The reason Fernando was in the paddock this weekend actually was largely to sort out his McLaren future. And that's contractually, of course, don't forget, he's still on a retained contract with McLaren. I believe from talking to people, he was there discussing the future of that. Does he continue? Does he continue doing, with McLaren and their IndyCar program? How does that proceed? How does that fit into his current contract? And I mean, I think it's all that kind of stuff rather than specifically a return to F1 that he was there for. I'm sure there will have been discussions. If his management were there, and I didn't see whether they were or not, but they will have been in discussions. It would be silly not to. But can he go back to Ferrari? I just can't see it. Right, Silency TM says, do you think that the stewards were scared to penalise Charles Leclerc because of the Tifosi? It's a really interesting point, this. And, you know, as I said to you earlier, Michael Massey, the race director, came out and gave a pretty good and pretty clear and frank explanation of how the stewards came to their decisions and the decision-making process, how it's been, the change in philosophy has been led by the teams, and it all makes sense to me. Now, were they scared to penalise the kind of Ferrari superstar on Ferrari home turf? I really hope not. I really don't think so, but I really hope not. You know, if we get to that point, we're in trouble, aren't we, as I said before? So I don't think that was an issue. I think they would have been strong enough to make the decision. Look, they penalised Seb, didn't they? They gave him a stop and go a drive-through. What did he get? They gave him a penalty. So they're not afraid to penalise a Ferrari driver. I just think it was the right decision in that particular incident with Charles, and it allowed the racing to continue, and it was great racing. Anish Kundanya says, why is Vettel making mistakes? Well, that is the question that we're all asking. I'm sure it's also the question that Seb's asking himself. And I don't subscribe to the idea of writing Sebastian off. Yeah, he's made too many mistakes, and he's made them in unpressurised situations at times. But drivers have that, and when your confidence is low, and clearly it has to have taken a hit with what's gone on with him, but also what's gone on with his teammate. And particularly that we're in Italy this week. This is a place where everything's about Ferrari. All the attention, the front pages and the back pages of every newspaper are about Ferrari. Every single news headline, news bulletin is about Ferrari when it comes to Monza. And if he's seeing the name Charles Leclerc a lot more than he's seeing the name Sebastian Vettel, it's got to start wearing away at your confidence. He'll say it won't. It has to. We're all humans. It has to have some kind of impact. And I think when that sort of thing happens, you potentially, even subconsciously, start to overdrive. And I just think some of those factors, I'm not going to speak for Seb, only he knows really, and maybe he doesn't even know. But that's a definite possibility from the outside. But he needs to eradicate the mistakes. But as I said before, he could have been on pole for this race. If he'd had a great Saturday, got the toe, stuck it on pole, he'd have been in a very different situation come Sunday. So let's not write him off. Way too early to write him off. He could turn it round like that. Matthew Steer, on a similar note to the last one, says, with the emergence of Leclerc at Ferrari, do you think we could eventually see Vettel make a move back to Red Bull? I mean, why not? I think that's a possibility. I actually think it's unlikely, and my most likely scenario in all of this, with no evidence, this is just me speculating, is that Sebastian will see out his Ferrari contract and then potentially walk away from the sport. If he did that, I think he could do it with his head held high. I'm not sure, and of course everyone's still waiting to see what 2021 looks like. But I think whether he goes back to Red Bull, I just don't know. Oh, there's my room service. Pizza and beer. Cheers. Right, so where's my phone? Let's rattle through a couple more, and then I'm going to move on to YouTube to get some out off the YouTube platform as well. Did I even finish that last question? I can't remember because the doorbell went. Right, this is a question that I think a few people asked, and I've actually touched on it before. This one comes from SupRub, who says, hi Mark, what's your take on dummy pit stops from Mercedes? Don't they do it too often? Look, the rule with dummy pit stops, and we call them dummy pit stops, that's not really the right terminology. That's what everyone assumes they are, and maybe on occasions that is what they are. I've done it myself. I know it happens. I'm not stupid. But all that they have to do to prove that they had some intention, or at least some consideration, that they were thinking about making a genuine pit stop, is make a comment on the radio, is chat about it amongst themselves, which happens anyway because they've got to call the guys out into the pit lane. So they've only got to show some consideration that they had to be ready because they might have made a pit stop, and then it's absolutely fine. And there's some justification to do that as well. They're not all going to be dummies because, as I said before, they're the first team in the pit lane at most circuits, which means they get very little warning between the driver leaving the track and arriving at the box, unlike the guys further down the pit lane, of course. So they do have to cover their options in that sense. So for me, I don't have an issue with it. If they really wanted to somehow tighten the rule up, then they could, but within the rules, there's nothing wrong with what Mercedes do right now. It may be against the spirit of the rules, and that's another subject altogether, but look, this is a sport where you're going to play the game, you're going to bend the rules, you're going to look for loopholes and push the boundaries. Every team does it in many areas around the car and the sport, so for me, I don't have a real problem with it. Right, I'm going to eat some pizza, drink some beer, find some questions on YouTube, because lots of you have sent me questions on that platform, and I'll come back and do a couple more. That's better. Right, a couple more before I hit the sack. Not we, just me. This one from YouTube comes from Quicklap, who says, Monza and the old Hockenheim ring gave us some great low downforce races. Should and could F1 go to Le Mans for more of this? Well, I mean, I'd love to see F1 cars running around Le Mans, wouldn't you? That would be epic. It's a long old lap, of course. Long old straights. It would require some pretty spectacular setup work. But why not? Fantastic. And then the other one that I just saw here, well, it's a really long, this one comes from Chuck Bartowski, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, and this is something I should say actually for lots of you. If you're writing me a question with hashtag AskElvis, and if you, like, it's fine if you want to write a long question, that's absolutely fine. I will always read it when I can, and I'll try and answer you. But if you want it read out in the video, don't make it a 2-page essay, because obviously I can't read all of that out in a short YouTube video. So I'm going to massively summarise this one from Chuck. He's talking about qualifying and that debacle that happened on Saturday with Q3, and lots of people of course have mentioned this, talked about it. It was a joke, and the thing that a lot of people seem to be talking about, and Chuck talks about this as well, about how the engineers screwed it up. How could the very best engineers in the world screw it up? I'd argue that the engineers didn't really screw it up. The engineers sent all of their cars out with enough time for them all to get round to get round the warm-up lap, the out lap, to start a timed lap. It was the drivers that then took it into their own hands to start playing absolute silly buggers out on the circuit. That's what cost them the time. Yes, they were all waiting in the garage to leave it as long as possible, and you can always say, well, why didn't they just come out really early? Well, we know why they didn't come out really early, because the tow around Monza is worth probably half a second. So you need it to get the best lap time out. So they're all waiting, they're all trying to play this game of cat and mouse, and of course when nobody goes at the end, they all have to go because they're going to run out of time. But at that point, because they've all left it so late, the drivers need to get on with it, and they didn't. They started playing games with each other, it got stupid, they're jostling. Anyway, we all know what happened now. It was a ridiculous farce, unfortunately, and almost everybody missed out. The point that Chuck was referring to, and on this point I agree with him, why can't we just instigate a kind of a maximum lap time for your out lap, whereby if you go over that maximum allowed lap time, you get penalised or you lose your lap or whatever. It's as simple as that, and I think that is exactly what will happen. There'll be you know, a stipulated lap time for your out lap that you must be within the limits of, and if you don't do that, you'll be penalised. So it seems like a very simple fix, but my argument is that it was more to do with the drivers than the engineers of us actually ending up in that mess. Right, I am going to go to bed because it is now very late. It's nearly 11 o'clock on Sunday night. I've got a 7 AM call time where I'm going in to do a film with, I think it's a top secret BMW. I don't think I'm allowed to tell you what it is. It's a top secret variant on one of the BMW range, let's say that. If I can show you tomorrow, I will, but if I can't, maybe you'll never know. Alright, listen, thanks ever so much for all the questions. If I have time, I'll pick more of this up tomorrow. If I don't, sorry, but thanks very much for all of your questions, and give me a moment and I'll come back and announce the winner of the the special artwork, the Ferrari 250 GTO artwork, which I hope you'll agree is pretty awesome. And I think lots of you want it because lots of you entered. So stand by, I'll let you know who's won. Right, I have just been through all of the entries for this week's competition. Thank you to all of you who took part. I do genuinely really appreciate everybody who takes the time to enter these competitions. There's nothing in it for me. I'm just doing this because the GP Box have kindly offered to supply this amazing array of prizes, and I know that you guys love them because I see how many people enter and how much you want them, and I totally get that because they're great prizes. So thank you again to the GP Box. Thank you to you guys. This week's winner is Phil Hendrickson. Phil Hendrickson, that is from Twitter, that one I think. Yes, that one's from Twitter, at Drumphil65. You have won that amazing piece of artwork from Joel Clark. Maybe drop him a line, say thank you. Go and check out the gpbox.com if you haven't already. There's more of that and some more amazing stuff on there from all sorts of creators, artists, suppliers. Go check it out. I'll link it all in the description. But for now, well done, Phil Hendrickson. Congratulations. I will contact you and we'll get your address and send that off in the post as soon as possible. Right, thanks again, guys. Appreciate all of your input this week. Let me know. Hit me up in the comments and let me know some of your thoughts on some of the things that I've talked about. There were some controversial moments in this year's Italian Grand Prix, weren't there? Stewarding decisions, driving decisions across Saturday and Sunday. Let me know your thoughts. I always like to read them. But for now, though, I'll catch you very soon. Ta-da.